Welcome to Void of Rules, where nightmares have no boundaries. In this channel, we explore the darkest corners of horror that most dare not enter. Every video takes you deeper into the shadows where forgotten terrors wait. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by year's end. The void hungers for new souls. And now, let's dive into the void. The first thing they tell you about Pinehollow, Vermont is that the colours in autumn are unlike anywhere else in New England. What they don't tell you is that some roads don't appear on any map, or that certain houses only exist on particular days of the week. My name is David Mercer, and until 3 months ago I was living in Boston, drowning in student debt and working a soul-crushing customer service job. When I saw the job listing for a delivery driver in Pinehollow with a salary that seemed too good to be true, I jumped at the opportunity. A quiet town surrounded by mountains and forests, away from the city noise. It sounded perfect. The drive to Pinehollow took me through increasingly remote countryside. The GPS signal weakened as I wound deeper into the green mountains, tall pines pressing close to the narrow road. As cell reception faded, I felt a curious mix of liberation and unease. By the time I reached the town limits, marked by a weathered wooden sign with peeling paint, I'd been off-grid for nearly an hour. Pinehollow appeared frozen in time. The main street featured Victorian buildings with elaborately carved trim, gas lamps that actually lit at dusk, and not a single chain store in sight. People walked at an unhurried pace, nodding politely to each other. Some even tipped their hats, a gesture I'd only seen in old movies. I parked outside a brick building with Pinehollow Express Delivery painted in gold lettering on the window. The interior was surprisingly modern sleek computers, digital shipping systems, and a fleet management board showing delivery routes throughout the region. The interview with Eleanor Vaughan, the manager, was brief and oddly formal. She was tall and angular, with perfect posture and steel grey hair pulled into a severe bun. She barely glanced at my resume, instead asking questions that seemed unrelated to delivery work. Did I have any family nearby? Was I comfortable with isolation? Did I believe in following instructions precisely? Some of our delivery routes require special attention, she said, her steel grey eyes evaluating me. Not everyone is suited for this position. I assured her I was detail-oriented and could handle whatever the job required. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and handed me an employee handbook, along with a separate leather-bound book titled Delivery Protocols for Outlying Areas. "Read this tonight," she said, tapping the leather cover. "Memorize it, your life may depend on it." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke about treacherous mountain roads or aggressive dogs. The look she gave me made my smile fade. "I'm not being dramatic, Mr. Mercer. In Pinehollow, following protocol keeps you safe." The company provided accommodation, a small rental cabin on the eastern edge of town. Eleanor drove me there herself, pointing out landmarks along the way. The general store that doubled as a post office, the diner where the apple pie is worth dying for, her words delivered without a hint of humour, and the town hall with its oddly asymmetrical clock tower. "Town meeting is the first Wednesday of every month," she informed me. "Attendance is mandatory for all residents." "What do you discuss?" I asked. "Town business," she replied curtly. "You'll receive an invitation." The cabin was small but comfortable, nestled at the edge of town with a view of the forest that stretched endlessly behind it. It came fully furnished, including a well-stocked kitchen and, strangely, a landline phone but no internet connection. "Cell service is unreliable here," Eleanor explained, handing me the keys. "The landline always works, always answer it, day or night." She paused at the threshold. "And Mr. Mercer, I strongly advise against wandering in the woods after dark. The trails can be deceptive." That night I sat on the porch swing and opened the protocol book. The binding cracked as if it hadn't been opened in years, yet the leather was supple, the pages intact. The pages were yellowed, some entries handwritten, others typed, as if compiled over many years. The rules inside made no sense. Never deliver packages after sunset to addresses ending in odd numbers. If a customer offers you water, accept it but don't drink it. Don't look directly at any wind chimes. If you see a red fox, return to the delivery centre immediately. Never comment on family photos in homes. If a customer says you're earlier than expected, respond only with, "Traffic was light today." When delivering to houses with more than one chimney, approach from the east side only. Do not accept gifts except on the first Friday of the month. If you hear humming from inside a house before knocking, return the package to the centre marked undeliverable. Avoid stepping on property lines or boundaries when possible. The list went on for pages, each rule more bizarre than the last. I assumed it was some strange local tradition, or perhaps an elaborate hazing ritual for new employees. Either way, I needed this job. As I read, the forest behind my cabin seemed to come alive with sounds. Rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and occasionally something that sounded unsettlingly like distant laughter. I told myself it was just wildlife, but found myself locking the doors and drawing the curtains tight before going to bed. My first week was uneventful. I delivered packages to normal homes with normal people who smiled, signed for their deliveries, and occasionally offered coffee. The town was picturesque, with a quaint main street, a diner where everyone seemed to know each other, and beautiful old houses with wraparound porches. The other delivery drivers were friendly enough but remained distant, asking few questions about my life before Pinehollow and offering little information about themselves. Most were locals who'd lived in town all their lives, speaking of the surrounding forests with a reverence that bordered on religious. During lunch breaks, I'd often find them huddled together, conversations abruptly ceasing when I approached. Once I overheard fragments, the borders thinning early this year, and porters showing signs already. They dispersed when they noticed me listening. By Friday, I'd memorized most of the standard routes and was confident enough to ask Eleanor about the strange protocol book. Some of these rules seem unusual, I ventured. Are they really necessary? Eleanor was sorting packages, her back to me. She paused, shoulders tensing. "These mountains are old, Mr. Mercer," she said without turning. "Older than the town, older than this country. They have peculiarities. The protocols developed over generations to keep our drivers safe." "But wind chimes? Red foxes?" She turned then, fixing me with a gaze that made my skin prickle. "I understand skepticism. All new drivers feel the same." Her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "But I've been managing this facility for 37 years. I've never lost a driver who followed protocol. Not one." The implication hung in the air. Before I could respond, she handed me a small stack of packages. "These need delivering today. Standard routes. Nothing complicated. Monday you'll begin training on Route 7. Oh. I spent the weekend exploring the town and settling into my cabin. The townspeople were polite but reserved, watching me with curious eyes. At the local diner, the Hungry Pines, the waitress, Maggie, according to her name tag, chatted amiably about the town's history. "Pinehollow's older than the nation itself," she said, refilling my coffee cup. "Founded in 1797 by the Watchers of the Vale." Watchers of the Vale? Religious group believed this area was special, spiritually speaking. Said the veil between worlds was thinner here. She smiled. Old superstitions, you know how it is. But some traditions stuck. The town meetings, the seasonal festivals. "And the delivery protocols?" I asked casually. Her hand froze momentarily. "You work for Eleanor then?" "Started this week." Maggie leaned closer, listened to her. "Follow the rules, especially on Route 7. She straightened, expression brightening, artificially. "More coffee, hun." Then came Route 7. Monday morning dawned foggy and cool. At the delivery centre, Eleanor was waiting with James Porter, a veteran driver who would be training me. "We only send certain drivers to these addresses," Eleanor explained, handing me a stack of packages. "Remember your protocols." James was tall and gaunt, with a perpetual 1,000-yard stare. Despite being only in his 30s, his hair was prematurely grey. He walked with a slight limp and spoke rarely. "Been here long?" I asked as we loaded packages into his delivery truck. "Depends on how you measure time," he responded cryptically. "Read your protocol book carefully, especially the pages that weren't there when you first got it." "What do you mean, pages that weren't there?" James just shook his head. "You'll see. Just follow the rules, David. Never break protocol. Not even once." Route 7 took us away from town, deep into the forested hills, where houses were few and far between. The roads narrowed, sometimes barely more than dirt tracks winding between ancient trees that seemed to bend toward the car as we passed. "Notice anything about the addresses?" James asked as we drove. I looked at the delivery manifest. Each address along Route 7 was in a different part of the mountains, yet they were numbered sequentially. "They're all part of the same street, but miles apart from each other." James nodded approvingly. "Good observation. Route 7 isn't a real street. It's a designation for special clients." "Special how?" He didn't answer, instead pulling up to our first stop, a large Victorian farmhouse that looked well maintained despite its obvious age. It stood in a clearing, surrounded by a white picket fence with unusual symbols carved into the posts. "Mrs. Blackwood," James said. "She'll invite you in. Don't enter unless she invites you exactly 3 times. She'll offer water, accept but don't drink." He handed me the package. "Your delivery. I'll watch from here." I approached the house, conscious of James's eyes on my back. The gate swung open at my touch with a creak that seemed to echo too long in the still air. The front yard featured a garden of plants I'd never seen before. Flowers with too many petals, vegetables growing in perfect geometric patterns. An elderly woman answered my knock, her smile revealing too many teeth that seemed too white for her weathered face. "Oh, a new delivery boy," she said, eyeing me with unsettling intensity. "Come in while I find a pen to sign." I hesitated, remembering protocol dictated I never enter homes on Route 7 unless specifically invited 3 times. She had only invited me once. "I can wait here, ma'am." Her smile tightened. "Nonsense, come in. It's too cold out there." That was twice. I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm fine out here, thank you." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment? Anger? Before her smile returned. "Well, at least take some water. You look thirsty." She disappeared inside, returning with a glass of clear water. I remembered the rule, accept but don't drink, and took it with a thank you. "Drink up," she urged, watching me intently. "I'll save it for the road," I replied. "I'm not thirsty right now." Her eyes narrowed, and I noticed they were an unusual violet colour. "You're earlier than expected," she said suddenly. My mind raced to the protocol. "Traffic was light today," I responded automatically. The tension in the air dissipated immediately. She signed for her package and returned inside without another word, leaving me holding the untouched glass of water. I placed it carefully on the porch railing and hurried back to the truck. James nodded approvingly as I climbed in. "Well handled. 8 years ago, a driver drank the water. He changed." "Changed how?" James started the engine. "He still delivers for her, just not packages you'd recognize." The rest of the day followed similar patterns. We delivered to a house where all the windows were covered with mirror fragments. A cabin where the owner would only accept packages through a special slot in the door. A modern home where 6 identical children sat on the porch swing, moving in perfect synchronization. At each stop, James observed my adherence to a protocol with growing approval. By late afternoon, as we headed back to town, he seemed to have reached a decision. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Most newcomers make at least one mistake their first day." The protocols seem bizarre, but I'm starting to think they're actually important, I admitted. More than you know. James's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Eleanor will have you doing solo runs on Route 7 soon. Before that happens, there are things you should understand. He pulled over at a scenic overlook. Below us spread the valley containing Pinehollow, looking impossibly small and vulnerable against the vast wilderness surrounding it. The town exists because of an agreement, James said, his voice low. The founders discovered something in these mountains, something old and hungry. They made a pact. The town would be protected, would prosper, as long as certain tributes were maintained. I felt a chill despite the truck's heater. What kind of tributes? Various kinds. The seasonal festivals are part of it. The town meetings and the deliveries. We're delivering tributes. Sometimes we're just maintaining boundaries. Sometimes... He trailed off, staring at the town below. The point is, the protocols keep the balance. Break them, the balance tips. And trust me, you don't want to be around when that happens. When I returned to the delivery centre, Eleanor was waiting. "How was Mrs. Blackwood?" she asked. "She offered me water," I replied. Eleanor nodded approvingly. "You didn't drink it." "Good." "What would have happened if I had..." She didn't answer, instead checking something off on her clipboard. "Tomorrow you'll do Route 3. Straightforward deliveries, nothing complicated. You've earned a break after today." That night, I dreamed of Mrs. Blackwood's garden. In the dream, the geometrically arranged vegetables pulsed with light, forming patterns that seemed almost like words. Mrs. Blackwood stood among them, but she wasn't old anymore. She was ageless, with violet eyes, containing galaxies. "You'll drink the water eventually," she said. "They all do." I woke gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat despite the cool room. The leather-bound protocol book lay open on my bedside table, though I was certain I'd left it on the desk across the room. A new page had appeared, written in flowing script. "Dreams are messages. Record them faithfully." Over the next few weeks, I alternated between standard deliveries and accompanying James on Route 7. I began keeping a journal documenting the strange occurrences. October 5th, delivered to the Hayworth place. Clock on their wall ran backward. They didn't seem to notice. October 8th, house at the end of Lakeside Drive had identical twins standing in every window, perfectly still. Protocol said nothing about this. James advised avoiding eye contact and speaking only when spoken to. We left quickly. October 10th, dream last night. Endless forest where trees whispered my name. Woke to find twigs and leaves in my bed. Doors and windows still locked. October 13th, found a package in my truck I didn't load. Addressed to a street that doesn't exist. Eleanor took it without comment when I brought it back. October 15th, first solo run on Route 7. The Blackwood house looked different, larger, with more windows than before. Mrs. Blackwood offered water again. Asked about Boston. How did she know I'm from there? Never mentioned it to her. I noticed what James meant about new pages appearing in my protocol book. Each morning, there seemed to be additional rules I swore weren't there before. If you deliver to the Blue House on Milford Road, count the windows before approaching. If there are more than 6, drive away. Never make deliveries to 347 Pine Creek Road on the 3rd Thursday of any month. If a child asks you your name, give a false one. Houses with no visible chimney but smoke rising from the roof should be approached with caution. If you hear your name called from the woods, do not respond or look toward the sound. Packages wrapped in green paper should only be delivered by hand, never left on porches. I tried asking other drivers about these experiences, but most avoided the subject. Those who did talk provided only vague warnings. Just follow protocol, or don't ask too many questions. The town itself began to feel different. I noticed people watching me, not just glancing, but staring with undisguised interest. At the local diner, conversations would pause when I entered and resume with a slightly different tone. October 21st was the town's autumn equinox festival, though the actual equinox had passed a month earlier. Eleanor insisted all employees attend. The town square was transformed with lanterns and bonfires, tables laden with food, and a large maypole wrapped in ribbons, despite it being entirely the wrong season for one. The festivities began with Mayor Hopkins, a corpulent man with rosy cheeks and unnervingly small eyes, giving a speech about tradition and community. Throughout, his gaze kept returning to the delivery drivers gathered at the edges of the crowd. Next came the blessing of the pathways, where townsfolk walked in complex patterns around the square, carrying jars of light that left glowing trails in the air. "The patterns matter," James murmured beside me. "They're renewing the boundaries." "Boundaries of what?" "Between here and elsewhere." He nodded toward Eleanor, who stood beside the mayor, watching the proceedings with unusual intensity. She's the keeper of ways. Has been for nearly 40 years. The evening culminated in a ritual where each resident approached a central bonfire and tossed in a small wrapped package. When my turn came, Eleanor pressed a small bundle into my hands. "Offer it to the flames," she instructed, "and as it burns, think of the paths you've travelled." The bundle contained a lock of hair, my hair, though I had no recollection of cutting it. When I looked questioningly at Eleanor, she merely smiled. "We took the liberty. For the ritual, it binds you to Pinehollow's protection." As I tossed it into the fire, the flames turned momentarily green, and I felt a strange sensation, as if invisible threads were attaching themselves to my skin, tugging gently but insistently. After the festival, I found myself increasingly drawn to Route 7 deliveries. Despite their strangeness, or perhaps because of it, I volunteered for them, spending more time on those remote mountain roads than in town. Something about those houses, those customers, fascinated me in ways I couldn't articulate. Then, James disappeared. One Monday, in late October, he failed to appear for work. Eleanor seemed unsurprised, assigning me his deliveries without comment. "Where's James?" I asked, as she handed me the manifest. "He's no longer with the company," she announced, her voice flat, emotionless. "Did he quit? Move away?" I pressed. "There is no James Porter," she replied, as if I'd asked about a fictional character. "Please focus on today's deliveries." That evening, I drove to James's apartment, a small unit above the hardware store on Main Street. The building manager, Mr. Grady, looked confused when I mentioned James's name. "Nobody by that name lives here," he insisted, though I'd helped James carry groceries up just the week before. When I mentioned him to Maggie at the diner, who I'd seen chatting with James countless times, she looked at me blankly. "I don't know anyone by that name, honey. Are you feeling all right? You look pale." I wasn't imagining things. James had existed. We'd worked together for weeks, and now everyone was pretending he never had. That night, I found a new page in my protocol book, written in what looked like dried brown ink. "Never mention those who break protocol. They belong to the forest now." Increasingly unsettled, I began researching Pinehollow's history in earnest, spending evenings at the local library poring over town records and old newspapers. The librarian, Miss Winters, a woman who seemed simultaneously young and ancient, watched me with knowing eyes but never interfered. The town had been founded in 1797 by a religious community called the Watchers of the Vale, who believed certain places were thin spots between our world and another. According to their beliefs, these thin spots needed to be managed through ritual and offering. Their writings described entities they called those who wait beyond, beings of immense power who could bestow prosperity or devastation, depending on how they were appeased. What caught my attention was the pattern of disappearances. Every 7 years, dating back to the town's founding, people went missing, typically outsiders or newcomers, and almost always delivery workers, mail carriers, telegram boys, package deliverers. The current year, I realised with growing unease, marked the 7th year since the last disappearances. In a dusty archive room, I found a journal from 1895 belonging to a mail carrier named Thomas Wheeler. His entries mirrored my experiences with unsettling similarity, describing strange houses, odd rules to follow, and townspeople who watched him with hungry anticipation. The journal ended abruptly in October of that year with a frantically scrawled entry. They're preparing me for something. The roots form a pattern, a spiral drawing me inward. Eleanor knows. She's not what she seems. None of them are. If you're reading this, leave now. Monday is when the barriers weaken. Use the covered bridge, don't look back. I found other records too, fragments of journals, official reports, dismissively attributing disappearances to wildlife encounters or unfortunate accidents. Always in 7-year cycles, always in October. I began mapping my Route 7 deliveries, plotting each address on a large map of the area. When connected, they formed a distinct spiral pattern, expanding outward from the town centre, with each delivery taking me deeper into the surrounding forest, just like Wheeler had described 130 years earlier. Some houses I delivered to multiple times, and I noticed troubling details. Mrs. Blackwood, the elderly woman from my first Route 7 delivery, never seemed to age. The calendar in her kitchen always showed the same date, October 31st, 1954. Another customer, Mr. Winters, had a grandfather clock that chimed 13 times at noon. I began noticing symbols drawn on certain packages, not shipping labels or barcodes, but small, intricate designs that resembled interlocking circles and lines. These packages always went to the most remote addresses, and Eleanor always handed them to me personally. "These are priority deliveries," she would say, "no delays." Most disturbing were the houses that shouldn't exist. I delivered to addresses that appeared on no map, down roads that seemed to materialize as I drove. Some houses were visible only at certain times of day, shimmering into existence as the sun hit a particular angle. Despite my growing fear, I felt compelled to continue making these deliveries. It was as if some force was drawing me deeper into whatever mystery surrounded Pinehollow. I told myself I was investigating, gathering evidence, but a part of me knew there was something more, a pull I couldn't explain. At night, my dreams grew more vivid. October 26th. Dreamed I was delivering packages made of glass. Inside each was a tiny version of myself, screaming silently. Mrs. Blackwood collected them all, arranging them on shelves in a room larger than her house should contain. October 28th. Dreamed of a bridge spanning a chasm filled with mist. On the other side, someone who looked like James beckoned urgently. When I tried to cross, the planks turned to smoke beneath my feet. October 30th. No dreams last night. Instead, found myself sleepwalking in the forest behind my cabin. Woke at dawn miles from home, standing before a stone altar covered in moss. Carved into it, the same spiral pattern as my delivery routes. I began to notice physical changes in myself as well. My reflection seemed subtly wrong. My eyes a shade lighter, my movements slightly out of sync with my intentions. Food lost its taste. Sounds came muffled, as if heard through water, except for whispers from the forests which rang with crystal clarity. Halloween approached, and the town transformed. Not with the commercial decorations I expected, but with ancient symbols carved into door frames, strange effigies hanging from trees and bonfires lit on the surrounding hills each night. The townspeople grew increasingly animated, watching me with hungry anticipation whenever I passed. The breaking point came on the morning of October 31st, a foggy Monday. I had a delivery for a cabin deep in the woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that twisted through dense forest. The package was small but surprisingly heavy, marked with one of those strange symbols. The cabin appeared suddenly through the fog, a dark silhouette against the grey background. As I approached, a child, a boy of perhaps 6, stepped onto the porch. Something about him seemed off. His movements were too fluid, his eyes too knowing. "You're earlier than expected," he said, his voice oddly adult. "Traffic was light today," I responded automatically. He smiled. "Are you afraid yet, David?" I froze. Protocol specified the children should never know your real name unless you had told them. I hadn't. "What did you call me?" "David Mercer," the boy said, stepping closer. "From Boston, 32 years old. Previously employed at Stellar Customer Solutions. Current residence, 14 Willow Lane, Pinehollow. You think you're investigating us, but you're just following the path we've laid for you." I backed away, nearly dropping the package. The boy's eyes changed, the pupils elongating into vertical slits like a cat's. "You broke protocol," he whispered. "You looked directly at me. You weren't supposed to see me." I ran to my truck, threw the package on the passenger seat, and sped away. The fog seemed to thicken around me, the road twisting in ways I didn't remember. What should have been a 20-minute drive back to town stretched into hours. The sun had been high when I fled the cabin. It was nearly set when I finally saw the town lights through the trees. The package had changed during the drive. The brown paper wrapping had become translucent, revealing glimpses of something writhing inside. It emitted a faint humming that synchronized with my heartbeat. I should have thrown it out the window, but some compulsion kept me clutching it tightly. Eleanor was waiting when I returned, standing perfectly still in the empty parking lot. Her silhouette seemed wrong somehow, taller, with angles that didn't match human anatomy. "You saw something you weren't supposed to see," she said. It wasn't a question. "What's happening in this town?" I demanded. "What happened to James? What are these deliveries really for?" "Come with me," she replied, turning toward the building. Her office looked different at night. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, and I noticed details I'd missed before. Photographs on the wall of delivery drivers dating back decades, all with the same haunted expression I'd seen in James's eyes. On her desk sat items I recognized. James's keychain, the pen Thomas Wheeler mentioned in his 1895 journal, a watch I'd seen on another driver who had mysteriously transferred. "Pinehollow exists because of an arrangement," Eleanor said, sitting behind her desk. "The town was built on a convergence point, a place where barriers between worlds are naturally thin. The founders discovered this and made a pact. A pact with what? With those who dwell beyond. In exchange for the town's prosperity and protection, we maintain the delivery system." "You mean we're delivering packages to something not human?" Eleanor smiled thinly. "No, David. The packages aren't the delivery. You are..." My blood ran cold. "What?" "The drivers are the delivery. Specifically drivers with certain qualities, curiosity, intuition, a willingness to see beyond the ordinary. People like you. The protocols aren't to protect you, they're to prepare you. Each rule you follow, each strange encounter you navigate, changes you in subtle ways, makes you compatible." "Compatible with what?" "With the crossing," she said simply. "Those beyond require vessels occasionally. Carefully prepared vessels. The rules, the routes, the spiral pattern, they're all part of the preparation." "And James, the others who disappeared?" "They completed their purpose, just as you will." She opened a drawer and removed a small wooden box. "Tonight is Halloween, Samhain in the old calendar. The night when boundaries are thinnest. You've been prepared more quickly than most. The signs are clear." She opened the box, revealing a silver key that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "This unlocks the final door, your door." Her voice had changed, layered with other voices speaking in unison. "With each delivery, each rule followed, you've been building it without knowing a pathway home." "This isn't my home," I protested, though even as I spoke, I felt a yearning for something I couldn't name, something waiting beyond a door I hadn't known existed. "Not your former home," Eleanor agreed, "but your true one, the place you've always belonged. We merely facilitate the return." Through sheer will, I managed to stagger out of the office, out of the building, into the cold night air. My truck keys fell from my numbing fingers as I stumbled toward the vehicle. I had to escape, had to warn someone. In the truck, I found something tucked under the seat. A small notebook. James's handwriting filled the pages, detailing his own investigation, his growing horror as he realized what was happening. The final pages contained a map, a route out of town that avoided the thin spots where the barriers were weakest. According to James, Monday was the only day when escape might be possible. Something about lunar cycles and the feeding schedule of whatever lurked beyond. Today was Monday. I had one chance. The town had changed while I was in Eleanor's office. The streets were empty, houses dark, except for candles in every window. Not Halloween decorations, but ritual lights forming patterns that mirrored the spiral of my delivery routes. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. Abandoning my truck, I took James's map and began walking, staying off the main roads, moving through back alleys and woodland paths. The town seemed eerily silent, the few people visible standing motionless, watching me pass with unblinking eyes. The map led to an old covered bridge at the town's edge, marked with a note, "Boundary weakest here between 3 to 4 a.m. It was nearly 3 now. I quickened my pace, hope building for the first time since my conversation with Eleanor. As I moved through the darkness, memories surfaced, not my own, but fragments of other lives, other escapes. Thomas Wheeler running through these same streets in 1895. A telegram boy named Michael fleeing in 1937. James's own attempt just weeks ago. The pattern repeated, endless variations on the same desperate flight. The bridge appeared through the trees, silhouetted against the night sky. It looked ancient, the wood weathered and dark, spanning a ravine where a river churned far below. Beyond the bridge lay the main highway, and freedom. As I approached, a figure stepped out from the shadows. James. He looked wrong, his skin too pale, movements too precise, eyes reflecting light like an animal's. "You found my journal," he said, his voice oddly flat, "just like I found Thomas's, and Thomas found William's, and so it goes. James, you're alive?" Relief flooded through me. His smile was empty. "Not in the way you mean." Other figures emerged from the darkness. Eleanor, the child from the cabin, Mrs. Blackwood, and dozens of townspeople, all watching with the same vacant expression. "What is this?" I demanded. "The final delivery," Eleanor explained. "It always ends here, at this bridge. You think you're escaping, but you're actually arriving exactly where you're meant to be." "I don't understand." James stepped closer. "You've made this same journey dozens of times, David. Every Monday, you find my journal. Every Monday, you follow the map. Every Monday, you come to this bridge thinking you'll escape." "That's impossible. This is my first time here." "Is it?" Eleanor asked. "Then why do you have this?" She held up a leather-bound book, my journal, but it contained entries I hadn't written, detailing escapes I had no memory of attempting. Pages and pages spanning back months, years, all in my handwriting. "Your memories reset each time," she continued, "but the preparation continues, layer upon layer. Each cycle brings you closer to readiness." I flipped through the journal, horrified. The earliest entry was dated 7 years ago, exactly when I thought I'd moved to Boston. Had I ever actually lived there? Were my previous memories just implants, convenient fictions to make each cycle seem fresh? Halloween is special, the boy who wasn't a boy said. 7 years of cycles culminating tonight. The vessel is finally ready. Readiness for what? My voice was barely a whisper now. Eleanor gestured to the bridge. The air around it began to shimmer, the space between the wooden beams distorting like heat waves. Something was taking shape there, something vast and formless and hungry. For becoming the messenger, James said, the one who can travel between worlds and carry back what they need. And what do they need? Eleanor's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Fear, hope, the uniquely human experience of believing in escape even when there is none. You generate it so beautifully, cycle after cycle. I won't go, I insisted, though my feet were already moving toward the bridge, drawn by an irresistible pull. You always say that, Mrs. Blackwood said with a smile, right before you deliver yourself. As I approached the bridge, I noticed carvings on the support beams, names and dates going back centuries. Each driver who had come before me, each delivery successfully completed. Why me? I asked, fighting the compulsion with diminishing strength. You applied for the position, Eleanor said simply. You came willingly, drawn by the call that only suitable vessels can hear. You've always been meant for this, David. You belong to the spaces between worlds. The townsfolk began a low, rhythmic chanting. With each syllable, the shimmering in the bridge's archway grew more solid, forming a doorway that wasn't quite a doorway, leading to a place that wasn't quite a place. My feet carried me forward as memories long suppressed bubbled to the surface. I'd been here before, not just once, but countless times. I remembered now, the first cycle, my genuine arrival in Pinehollow 7 years ago, the gradual discovery of the town's secrets, the first escape attempt, and then the reset, the manufactured memories, the false sense of having just arrived. Over and over, each cycle refining me, changing me at some fundamental level. The process requires genuine emotion, Eleanor explained, as if reading my thoughts. Manufactured fear isn't sufficient. You must believe each cycle is your first and only chance. Your terror and hope must be authentic. The shimmering doorway pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Through it I caught glimpses of impossible geometries, vast landscapes that seemed to fold in on themselves, and beings that shifted form, even as I tried to comprehend them. What happens to me after? I managed to ask. You'll serve as emissary, Eleanor said. Your consciousness will carry human experience to those beyond, while your form remains here to guide the next cycle, just as James guides you now. I looked at James with new understanding. He wasn't James anymore, hadn't been for a long time. Something else wore his face, used his memories to play this role in the endless cycle. I'm not ready, I protested weakly. That's what they all say, the thing that wasn't James replied. But you are, more ready than any vessel before you. 7 years of preparation, 7 years of belief, 7 years of hope, repeatedly crushed and reborn. I was at the threshold now, the doorway humming with anticipation. Behind me, the townsfolk had formed a perfect spiral, Eleanor at its centre. Their chanting intensified, voices harmonizing in ways human throats shouldn't manage. Wait, I said desperately. If I'm the vessel, who arrives to replace me? Who guides the next cycle? Eleanor smiled, not a human smile, but something wider, deeper. Why you do, David. A part of you returns changed. The cycle isn't just preparation, it's transformation. In that moment, I understood the true horror of Pinehollow. This wasn't a simple sacrifice, a one-way journey. Whatever waited beyond would take what it needed from me, but would also give something back. Something that would wear my face, use my memories, guide the next driver through the same spiral path. I would be both victim and perpetrator, trapped in an endless loop of delivery and receipt. Images flashed through my mind. Myself watching from the shadows as a new driver discovered James's journal. Myself standing beside Eleanor as she explained the protocols to a fresh recruit. Myself at the bridge year after year, millennium after millennium, as the town fed its hunger with carefully cultivated fear. With one last desperate effort, I tried to turn away from the doorway. My body refused to respond. The pull was irresistible now, the threshold blurring the boundary between my flesh and the air around it. Fear feeds those beyond, Mrs. Blackwood said, her voice oddly gentle, but it's hope that binds the vessel. Hope that this time will be different. Hope that you'll escape. That beautiful, human capacity for hope even in the face of inevitable failure. Next time, the child promised with a smile that stretched too wide, you'll try a different route, perhaps through the mountains rather than the bridge. That variation always produces exquisite results. The doorway engulfed me, reality fracturing around the edges. I felt myself separating, consciousness pulled one way, body another. Through the dissolving barrier between worlds, I caught a final glimpse of the town, the spiral of watchers, and at the centre, something rising from Eleanor's shadow, something vast and ancient that had been wearing her form, just as something would soon wear mine. "See you next Monday, David," Eleanor called as the world dissolved around me. "Try a different escape route next time. It makes the fear so much more flavourful." As the void enveloped me, my last conscious thought was wondering how many times I'd stood in this exact spot, believing I was about to escape, only to become part of the delivery once again. A package of fear and dwindling hope wrapped in a human form, addressed to recipients I would never truly comprehend. The cold clarity of full awareness lasted only moments before the reset began. Memories fading, experiences transforming into dreams, and then nothing, making space for the new narrative that would drive the next cycle. I blinked, disoriented. I was driving down a winding mountain road, a moving truck filled with my possessions behind me. Before me, a weathered wooden sign appeared through the mist. "Welcome to Pinehollow, where every path leads home." I smiled with anticipation. This job opportunity had come at the perfect time, a chance to escape my crushing debt in Boston, to start fresh in a quaint Vermont town. The position at Pinehollow Express Delivery offered good pay, flexible hours, and a company-provided cabin. It seemed too perfect, really. As I crossed the town line, a fleeting unease passed through me. For a moment, I thought I saw figures watching from the forest edge. A tall, angular woman, a gaunt man, an elderly lady with violet eyes, and a child with an unsettling smile. Then they were gone, if they'd ever been there at all. Probably just nerves about the new job, I told myself. I had a good feeling about this town, like I somehow belonged here. Behind me, unnoticed, my shadow didn't quite match my movements. It was already starting to change. In Pinehollow, Vermont, the delivery routes are carefully mapped, the protocols meticulously maintained, and the drivers always disposable. Route 7 awaits its next courier. The packages are prepared. The cycle continues. Remember, if you're passing through and see a Pinehollow Express delivery truck on a foggy Monday morning, don't make eye contact with the driver. He's not delivering packages, he is the package. And somewhere in the woods, another delivery manual appears, on another cabin porch, waiting for another David to arrive, drawn by the call that only suitable vessels can hear. The protocol endures. The delivery is eternal. The rules must be followed. Because in Pinehollow, Vermont, the addresses change, the routes shift, but the final destination always remains the same.